Hello friends, welcome to Engage Tech Online English by Dr. Vijay Shirsak. Friends, here in this video, we shall discuss metaphysical poetry and its features. Friends, metaphysical poetry as a literary movement emerged in the 17th century England. It was a time of great intellectual and cultural agitation in England. It was a literary movement characterized by its unique blend of wit, conceit, and philosophical exploration. The term metaphysical was first coined by Samuel Johnson, and he borrowed it from Dryden. Dryden used it in insulting sense. He says John Donne affects metaphysics, and since then Dr. Johnson used this term metaphysical poetry. That is, he coined this term to describe a group of poets known for their complex and abstract themes, intricate language, and unconventional imagery. Friends, the metaphysical poets were John Donne, George Herbert, Andrew Marvell, Thomas Carlyle, Richard Crashaw, Henry Vaughan, Abraham Cowley, and George Chapman. And there were many other minor poets also. All these poets ventured beyond unconventional poetic boundaries to create a style that continues to captivate readers with its ingenuity and profound exploration of the human experience. All these poets, that is, metaphysical poets, were greatly fascinated by metaphysics, a branch of philosophy that deals with abstract concepts such as existence, reality, and the nature of being. The metaphysical poets dealt with the themes like mysteries of life, death, love, God, and the universe. In this way, they dealt with all these themes in their poetry. Friends, now let me discuss major features of metaphysical poetry. In the major features, the most prominent feature of metaphysical poetry is the use of metaphysical conceit. Actually, this term metaphysical conceit is especially used in relation with the metaphysical poets. It is the most prominent feature of metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical concept is the use of elaborate and extended metaphors. That is, the use of elaborate and extended metaphors is known as metaphysical concepts. These concepts draw unexpected and often far-fetched comparison between two unrelated things. The poets used these concepts to explore abstract concepts and emotions in a novel and intellectual manner. Due to the use of such concepts, metaphysical poetry becomes rather difficult to understand. The next important feature of metaphysical poetry is the use of intellectual wit. Friends, metaphysical poets were known for their intellectual wit and cleverness. Their poetry often requires a certain level of intellectual capabilities from the readers. They often use complex wordplay, pun, paradoxes, and allusions in their poetry. The poets drew happiness in creating complex webs of thought and revealing in the intellectual challenging manner. In this way, friends, because of use of intellectual wit also, metaphysical poem becomes rather difficult to understand. The next important feature of metaphysical poetry is exploration of abstract themes. The major themes which we find in metaphysical poetry are the nature of love, time, mortality, God, and the human soul. All these metaphysical poets were less concerned with expressing simple emotions. They were more interested in using their poetry as a platform for philosophical and spiritual exploration. In this way, my dear friends, the metaphysical poets explored abstract themes like the existence of God, the nature of love, time, mortality, and the human soul. The next important feature of metaphysical poetry is fusion of the spiritual and the physical. We often find the fine blending of spiritual love and physical love in John Donne's poetry. Good Morrow is the best example of such kind. That is in the poem Good Morrow. John Donne, in that poem, we find journey of physical love to spiritual love. That is the journey of love from physical love to spiritual love. And in this way, we find a fine fusion of the spiritual and the physical in metaphysical poetry. We also know that most of the poems by John Donne are love poems. And we find intellectual wit also there in the use of the concepts. We have the best example of metaphysical concept in John Donne's poem Valediction Forbidding Morning. Similarly, we find the best example of his concept when he compares the couple with a compass. Again, there is the union or the unification of two lovers in the body of mosquito when the same mosquito bites the two, that is the lover and the beloved. And in this way, my dear friends, we find all these features in John Donne's poetry and in the poetry by other poets also. The next important feature of metaphysical poetry is paradox and ambiguity. That is, metaphysical poetry often embraced complex and ambiguity. It presented contradictory ideas. We find two opposite ideas present in the metaphysical poetry. And they challenged conventional thinking and encouraged readers to consider alternative viewpoints. And in this way, because of such paradoxical statements, because of putting these two opposite ideas together, metaphysical poetry becomes rather ambiguous also. And as a result, it becomes difficult also to understand. The next important feature of metaphysical poetry, which we find, is use of juxtaposition. The same thing, that is paradoxical statements. That is, the two opposite ideas are put together by the metaphysical poets in their poetry. And in this way, use of juxtaposition is one of the features of metaphysical poetry. Friends, the next important feature of metaphysical poetry is tension between sensuality and spirituality. There is tension between sensual and spiritual in metaphysical poetry. Once again, we have the example of Andrew Marvell and John Donne. We find this example in Andrew Marvell's poem To His Coy Mistress. The next important feature of metaphysical poetry, my dear friends, is metaphysical poetry is love poetry with a twist. That is metaphysical poets' treatment of the theme of love was unconventional. It was never conventional or in a traditional manner. Instead of conventional expressions of adoration, they examined the complexities of love. They often portrayed love as a spiritual and intellectual union rather than merely a physical attraction. The next important feature of metaphysical poetry is the use of unconventional rhyme and meter. That is, metaphysical poets experimented with rhyme and meter. They often used irregular patterns and unexpected combinations to fit their intricate ideas and wordplay. In this way, my dear friends, metaphysical poetry as a literary movement emerged in 17th century England. And that was a time of great intellectual and cultural agitation in England. We should remember this fact. The term metaphysical was first used by Samuel Johnson. The metaphysical poets were John Donne, George Herbert, Andrew Marvell, Thomas Carew, Richard Crashaw, Henry Vaughan, Colley, George Chapman, and many others. The major themes in metaphysical poetry were the mysteries of life, death, love, God, and the universe. The important features of metaphysical poetry are use of metaphysical concept, intellectual wit, exploration of abstract themes, fusion of the spiritual and the physical, use of paradox and ambiguity, use of juxtaposition, tension between sensuality and spirituality. Metaphysical poetry is love poetry with a twist. There is use of unconventional rhymes and meters in metaphysical poetry. In this way, friends, here in this lecture, we discussed metaphysical poetry as a literary movement. I hope that you might have liked this video. If you like this video, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, immediately please subscribe it. Thank you.